Hey there, Darcy Daniels with eGardenGo, and today I'm going to be diving into one of the combinations that is on the eGardenGo site. And one of the things that I really enjoy doing, besides coming up with ideas for how to artfully and appropriately combine plants, is I like to really share the why behind the combinations, so that beyond just seeing a combination that looks good and is attractive and that you might be inspired to use in your garden, I really like to share the thought process behind it, because that's more empowering, and that you can take these combinations and use them as a springboard for your own ideas. So let's go ahead and dig into this combination. Let me show you which one I want to show you that I want to talk about today. So this is a combination that is on the eGardenGo site, and we'll be digging in and we're going to be looking at it more closely. It's a combination that is for a full sun situation. It's a collection of pretty drought tolerant plants, and there are a total of let's see, what do I got? About 9 or 11 plants. So it's a pretty comprehensive plan. So I'm not actually comprehensive in the sense of realistic in terms of what real gardens are. Real gardens go from the canopy to the ground, and this combination is an example of that. So I want to dig into the planning that goes into this, and as I go along, we'll be talking about the plants that are included in this plan, why I chose them, how they work together, and then I'm going to show you some examples of a planting plan that really gives you a sense of how it would look, stylized, but still how it would look. So let's dig in, shall we? All right, and as a reminder, this has a planting plan available for download. You can, so if you like this combination after this video, it is something that you can purchase for a pretty nominal fee to get the full effect of it. All right. All right, so it's comprised of 11 plants, and I'm going to open up here momentarily I'm going to actually show you a screenshot of what if you were to download the planting plan, what it looks like, and give you just a sense of how they work, because that's universal across all the planting plans that are there. So typically what I like to start with is, this is the same photo collage that you saw on the eGardenGo site, but this is a PDF file with live links. So as you go in, and if we want to learn more about the different plants, we got this key. Notice how, I don't know if you can see this, but these are all live links. So if I click on any of these symbols, it's going to take me to the eGardenGo site, which is going to allow me to then learn more about the plants. So, it's very fluid. It goes back and forth. So this is the palette of plants. And notice it is really a garden for pretty mild climate. If we look at all the plants here, they are, this is suitable for a zone 8 garden. Now, there are substitutions that you can make, which we'll get to maybe momentarily, about what's driving the fact that it's only hardy to zone 8. A lot of these plants are perfectly suitable for a little colder than that, like zone 6 or 7. So a lot of times what I like to do is go in and find the culprit, if you will, that's driving that zone 8. And actually, let me just do that real fast with you, because you can kind of have that in your mind's eye as you're watching this. So here is, I'm back on the eGardenGo site, and this is showing the plants that are individually included in this combination. So there it is up there. These are the plants. And I'm just kind of scanning through. And again, you may or may not be able to see this, but I'm looking right in here. I'm looking at the zone. And this is kind of what I'm looking for. What are the plants that really need a more mild climate? So we've got this cistus. That's one thing that's definitely driving it. But other than that, let me see what else we got. Other than that, a lot of these plants are pretty darn cold hardy. So this is an easy substitution that we can talk about, is as you're looking at this combination, really all it would take would be modifying the cistus or subbing it out for something that is more cold hardy and wants the same cultural conditions and is the same size, so that it kind of works into the layout. So off the top of my head, I'm thinking, oh well, maybe like a landscape rose or something like that. So there's some pretty, which is much hardier. So there's some pretty easy substitutions. So don't be disheartened if you see that the planting plan that you're looking at is only hardy to zone 8, because that's going to be that is something that you could possibly remedy. All right, so let me just do a quick walk through what these look like. So we looked at the photo, then I give you a key of what these individual plants, excuse me, I went too fast there, what these individual plants are going to look like on the plan view. And so again, these are all live links listing, anytime you see A, that's that Caryopteris, B is that Cistus, and so on and so forth. This gives you an idea of what they look like in elevation view. So the relative size one to the other, which is really an important concept when you are designing a garden. How do you get that layered look? Well, you have plants that cover the ground. You have plants that occupy that mid-plane, and then you have plants that create a height, lift, and overhead canopy. So this gives you a sense that this does a pretty good job of that. The other thing I'll point out, because you're going to be seeing it, is down here, one of the planting plans that we're going to look at, it actually includes a real practical aspect in the layout as well, which is like a flagstone path to go through it. So that's why I have that on the key here. We're going to look at a rectangular planting bed. We're going to look at these 9 plants laid out in a bed that is 35 feet long and 10 feet deep. And here's that path that I was telling you about right there through the middle. Look for the L. And we're going to look at this in 3D here in just a second, but this gives you an idea of, just kind of a static elevation view where you can really start getting a sense of the layer of the plants, how they're put together and how they interact from a shape, size, texture, how many plants of each of the types are used. So let's see. And we're also going to look at an L-shaped bed, or corner bed. Both of these that we looked at are designs that are suitable to be seen from all sides. And you'll definitely see that as we get into the model. So we're going to transition to the model here momentarily. And as I'm doing that, the other thing that I want to just reiterate, focus on, remind, is that the cultural conditions, we're going to dig into some design aspects of this, but superseding and above that is the fact that all of these plants that are in this combination want the same growing conditions. And that is the fundamental, that is the base. And since what I'm really trying to talk about today is more the design aspect of things, I'm not focusing as much on that, but it is essential that the only plants that you consider for your combinations want the same growing conditions. By that I mean, the hardiness, they're all hardy in your zone. We talked about that a little bit in terms of the cistus and how you might make adjustments. and we want to make sure that they all want, the same amount of sun exposure or shade, that they're culturally a match in that respect, and the same amount of water. So this combination that we're looking at loves sun. The more sun, the better. It is very modest in its water requirements, and so pretty darn drought tolerant. And then beyond that, we're going to start talking about some of the design-oriented aspects of this. Sorry, my nose itches. From a design standpoint, we talked about the shapes and textures, and if we look at it here, we can see that we've got, some strong, upright, narrow shapes. We've got rounded shapes in a variety of colors and sizes. Here we are again. I like this one because it has a silhouette of a person. That person is probably, I need to measure to be sure in my 3D program, but she's about 5.5 feet tall. So this really gives you a sense of how it would feel from a scale standpoint if you're standing next to each of these plants. It also gives you a real good feeling for the fact that it's very layered. And here is, we saw this on the PDF file. We're now going to take a 3D spin around it. And so this is a rectangular bed using the plants that we showed, and really just creating a nice garden feel. And it is stylized, right? These are not photos, these are not real plants, but if you kind of squint your eyes and look at it with a creative mindset, you can really get a sense of how this garden might look. This is blooming right now, so we have to say, okay, well, what is this? This is looking how it might look in high summer, right? Because we've got the iris blooming, we've got the salvia blooming, the foliage is all looking great. So if this is in spring, more like summer, late summer, and sometimes these models, they are models, right? So they're not perfect. And so right now, one of the things that is probably not perfect about this is that, well, if we really started dissecting it, this tree is blooming. It's a very late bloomer. Probably won't cross over with the iris, right? So there are some imperfections in the models because, well, I can only model. I can't necessarily plant all of these out so I can photograph them through the year. But just the repetition is evident. So the smaller shrubs, usually in a garden of this size, this isn't a huge garden, but it's not small. You're going to have a fair amount of repetition. The only thing that isn't repeated is the tree. It's we have a crape myrtle in there, a white flowering crape myrtle, and then the other shrubs are repeated. So this right through with the rosy tones, those are Nandinas. So that's an evergreen shrub that is kind of rounded and fluffy and has a range of colors in its foliage. So that's part of the structure making. These blue spires, those are a conifer. They're evergreen, so they're going to be present all year. The cistus is also semi-evergreen, right? It doesn't look awesome in winter, but the foliage is definitely present. So it actually is kind of holding that place and has some stature. And then we've got down here, this is the little Juniper. So that's a blue foliage juniper, which we've got repeated through there. That blue kind of echoes it's a blue that's kind of carpeting the ground, which then echoes what's happening here on that blue spire. So it's a color echo with a repetition of color with a variety in shape. The yellow foliage there is the sun-loving, late summer blooming Caryopteris, so bluebeard. So that's going to be a part of the flower show that is later in the year, and it's going to be blue flowers against gold foliage and just be really, really quite pretty. And you can see we've got 3 of those going through there. So one of the things I like to do when I'm evaluating a planting design is I think about it through the seasons. And in my own garden, I just often just will go outside and stare at a space, look at the plantings, and in my mind's eye go through what's happening season by season. So if we were to do something like that with this garden, first of all, I want to familiarize yourself with the plants that are in there. Okay, this is right here. That's the juniper. That is the blue star, or what's it called? Yeah, blue star juniper. And this is blue arrow. So those are 2 evergreens. The rosy here is a Nandina, also evergreen. We haven't talked very much about it, and we will in a moment, but I want to talk about the ground plane in particular, like what's happening as a ground cover. Let's see, what didn't I mention? And then we just talked about the yellow. Okay, so that gives, I think you have and there's one plant that we haven't talked about. It's over here. This is another flowering shrub. This is a hibiscus, and chosen for late summer bloom. So let me walk you through season by season, and let's start with winter, right? So what would this garden look like in winter? Well, we would have the juniper present. We would have the Nandinas. We would have this juniper as well. So there's 2 different junipers. All these Nandinas. The bark of the crape myrtle is gorgeous. It's smooth, kind of mottled tan color. It's really just a really nice feature. And one of the reasons that I really like crepe myrtle so much. And then in winter, they're on this ground plane, which I guess we'll talk about here because we just haven't, is one of the things I like to do is garden right to the ground. And this is a drought-tolerant garden, so we've also added some succulents. And so I've got a tapestry of succulents. So I did like a gray ground-hugging native Sedum. That's the Cape Blanco. And then I am thinking that you would, basically have rivers and flows of both of these. So you would do the Pacific Shadows, which is a dark burgundy hens and chicks. It's much larger, so you're going to have a little textural contrast and color echo. The photo that you're seeing here on the Cape Blanco is part of its kind of winter coloration. It often turns a little pinkish around the edges in winter. It also has yellow blooms in summer. But I wanted to just point out that on the ground plane, everywhere you're seeing that pattern, we would just get several flats of these sedums, and we would just start populating them at the edges. And that ensures that we have interest all the way down to the ground, that we're covering our ground, we're creating a living mulch. And over time, this is a good start for ground covers. There are other things that could be added in there, but I really like to cover the ground with a living mulch of plants. And so this is a first start at that. So now back to our garden. So that's winter, that's the structure. In spring, things start waking up. And spring, late spring, there's a sequence of blooms that starts developing. We'd probably start with the iris and the cistus would probably come to the fore at about the same time. They would be shortly thereafter followed by the salvia. That's these spire-shaped purple blooms. And those would go on for a while. As the season progresses, there's a little bit of maybe a lull, but then this hibiscus over here, that's this plant here, its blooms would start, it would bloom very abundantly and for quite a while. Here it is. I like the red eye of that. That's the hibiscus, would start blooming. And then shortly thereafter would be the Caryopteris, which is the yellow foliage, and it would have blue flowers. So, and then shortly thereafter, or later in the summer, we would have the crepe myrtle blooming in white, kind of late summer and going on for that. But the shrubs were chosen for, just long bloom, easy care. Not a lot, they don't require deadheading or any of that sort of stuff, just usually some annual pruning and care is all that they're going to need. So relatively low maintenance. Let's see. And then in fall, in terms of fall color, there's not a lot, although the crepe myrtle will put on a fall color show. So we've gone through winter, winter goes into late winter and early spring, pretty static. Then it starts waking up. It starts with the earlier blooms of the cistus, goes to the iris, and then the salvia comes to the scene. The hibiscus is probably next, and the caryopteris and the crepe myrtle are, late summer. And on and off through the summer and peaking in summer, it's not inconsequential what's happening on the ground plane. We've got the burgundy foliage that is pulling and echoing anywhere that there's that dark foliage, from the Nandina to the eye of the bloom on that hibiscus. It's really kind of echoing back and forth with that. The blooms on the Sedum Capo Blanco those are yellow, and those are going to speak to the Caryopteris. So all in all, just really trying to knit it through. And the final thing I'll mention on this one is that the path I put in there is makes this really suitable in particular for like a parking strip. So that's kind of what I was thinking when I did this one. So it's a 10 by 35 foot garden that would be suitable for a parking strip. Looking at the plants in a different layout, so that L-shaped or that corner bed is next. So here it is. This garden is also designed to look good from all sides. It is using the same plants, and we're laying them out differently. You can really see this one has a little bit more, a little more structured in terms of how some of that evergreen is flowing through. I've really just done a serpentine of evergreen foliage through here, so it really is framing. So evergreen foliage can really serve to anchor, to frame, and that's kind of what we're doing here. We've got the Nandinas here, and by the way, there are many Nandinas, and we didn't really talk about the particular variety of this, but it is important because what we're using here is not a big one. This is, let's see here, I'm going to pull it up. This is a smaller one. This is Gulf Stream, and so you just need to make sure that you. Many plants have multiple varieties, and it matters which one you choose because they're going to be varieties that are selected for different things, and oftentimes that's size. So you really need to double check yourself. If you are put in a situation where you need to make substitutions, really check that they are comparable in terms of size. And if they're not, that's okay, but it is going to require more modification and adaptation of the plan. So anyway, so you can see that these gardens have just a lot going on, excellent structure, and I think that most anybody would enjoy having that in the front corner of their home, right? So thanks so much. I hope that this walkthrough was helpful and interesting. And so let me know if you have any questions or comments. And I appreciate you visiting with me today and allowing me to give you a little background on my thought process as it goes into creating these plant combinations. So thanks so much, and see you next time.